everyone. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Designing and Delivering Inclusive and Impactful Presentations. Your presenter is Skip Pettit, and he's going to tell you a little more about himself in his presentation. But some of the highlights is that he has taught at the U.S. Navy Postgraduate School. He has 2 master's degrees in counseling from the University of Maryland. He is a government trainer and consultant with 26 years of experience, and he is a seasoned TOC presenter. So, ladies and gentlemen, Skip Pettit.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. I appreciate that. Yes, just a quick overview. I've done lots and lots of training for DoD and civilian agencies. I've taught at the college level. I taught at OPM. I taught at USDA Graduate School for 15 years. And I've presented 13 conferences at Training Officers Conference. So it's a pleasure to be with you all today, albeit on Zoom. And so our topic today really is looking at designing and delivering inclusive and impactful presentations. Inclusive and impactful presentations. Now, this topic is particularly important now with the new administration that we have in, and their focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I'm currently working on 3 projects, nationwide projects for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we will weave a few things into this workshop. But as presenters, we have to be cognizant of what we're presenting, what words we're using, how we're presenting it, and we must be inclusive at the same time, be impactful. So without further ado, it's important that we make our presentations inclusive, that we really be careful with our humor and our jokes. What we may perceive to be funny, someone else may perceive to not be funny. So I caution you to use jokes sparingly. And if you're going to do a joke, make it about yourself. Let me tell you something silly that I did. Here's what happened. We need to be conscious of the fact that we have unconscious bias, and it is active and well and acting all the time. And unconscious bias will creep into our presentations, and we need to do everything we can to make sure that it doesn't. Another key component is to keep diversity, equity, and inclusion at the forefront of our training design. So if you look here, it says, think DE&I. Think about the diversity of your audience, how to make your presentation equitable, and how to be inclusive. So I'm going to use, for the purposes of this activity, equitable to include persons with disabilities who might be in your audience. And many people have invisible disabilities that you can't see. But you've got to anticipate that there will be people out there that have quote unquote special needs. And you want to make sure that you're including them and you're being equitable in your material design and presentation. Another just sort of side point for you to keep in mind is assume nothing. If you've been tasked to make a presentation, in advance as much as possible, if you're able to go on site, if we're ever able to do that again, go visit your meeting room. Make sure you have electricity in that room. Make sure you have all the cabling that you need to reach the sockets, extension cords, cables for computers and PowerPoint projectors, and just check everything. Check the lighting. Check how to turn the lighting on and off in case you want to show a DVD. All of that needs to be done in advance because otherwise you will be blindsided and take nothing for, for granted. Same thing for online training. If you are able to get yourself a Zoom master and somebody who can help you manage the technology while you are presenting, that is wonderful. It just takes your mind off of that and you can concentrate on your topic. But many times, like today, for example, I'm doing both. And so the more familiar you can become with your technology, the better off you'll be. What makes an inclusive and impactful presentation? Well, here are 7 key points I want to stress. We have to use inclusive and easy to understand language. The government is terrible with acronyms and making things complicated. So as much as possible, we want to be inclusive so everybody understands and is involved, and we want to make it easy to understand. We want to make it bias free. So we don't want to project our own biases into the presentation or into our involvement or prediction of who the audience is and how they're going to react to our presentation. A inclusive and impactful presentation is well designed, so it flows smoothly from start to finish. And it gets to the point very early. I let you know right away, we're going to study inclusive and impactful presentations. Maybe you've been to a presentation like I have, where I was halfway through the presentation and I still didn't know what they were presenting on. So we have to be upfront and let people know right away that this is what we're going to be talking about and this is why it's important to you. Then we want to provide precise and relevant data, and we want to not waste anybody's time. So those are the key things we want to do. In the military, I used to be in the Army. And when we trained in the Army, they told us to tell them what we're going to tell them, and then at the end, tell them what we told them. That's a great model. Tell them what you're going to tell them, and tell them what you told them. Slide number 5. Sometimes the presenter has fears about bad things that could happen. And what are some of the bad things that could happen? Well, we could forget our lines, or we could say or do something that's embarrassing, or we could get criticized, or the audience could reject what we're saying. Or maybe we're most fearful of, oh, what if somebody asks me a question I don't know the answer to? Well, these things happen, and they happen to all presenters. So we just have to get comfortable enough with our subject that we can anticipate what might happen. And if somebody asks you a question about, hey, what about this and this and this, and you don't know the answer, then tell them, gee, what a great question. Thanks for asking that. I don't know what the answer is for that. But if you'll give me a day or a week or a month or however much time you need, I will find out for you and I will get back to you. So we all have these fears, anticipate them. Maybe you even have different fears, but do the best you can to prepare for them. So combating unconscious bias is a piece of the puzzle. Unconscious bias is negative or positive reactions or perceptions or decisions that a person, me, is unaware of. And usually it's based on stereotypes. And we all have unconscious bias. We're all wired that way. But as presenters, we have to be careful that we don't let that cloud our presentation. we have to look at the second bullet here, recognize that it's harmful, and that we have to do everything we can to counteract them in ourselves and others. We need to become aware of how our presentation might be, quote unquote, exclusionary. Well, what does that mean? Well, that means that if you're in the in crowd, you'll know what this acronym means, or you'll know what I'm talking about. But if you're not in the club, you're not going to understand. We don't want to make a presentation like that. We want everybody to understand. We want everybody to be included in our presentation so that they can take the information and use it elsewhere. Bullet number 4, start with deliberate, conscious efforts to incorporate, to be inclusive in your presentation. Now, you're going to find out, if you haven't already, that there's a difference between diversity, equity, and inclusion. Diversity are all the things that make us different from each other. Yes, it's my sex and my race and my gender and my religion, but it's also where I went to school and my time in the military and my thinking style and my problem solving style and whatever languages I might teach. And there are many, many other things that go into making up who I am, my diversity. Then equity, you can think of as if a parade was going by and there was a fence in front of the crowd and you have 3 people standing there. You have a mother, father, and a child. The father is tall enough to look over the fence. The mother's a little shorter and stands on a box and can peek over. And the child can stand on 3 boxes and peek over the fence. You do whatever you need to do to balance it out so it's equal, so that everybody has the same opportunity. So you want to do the same thing in your presentation. How do you make it equal for everyone? And then diversity, equity, and inclusion. Lots of federal agencies are inclusive, are diverse. Few of them are inclusive. Inclusive is you're invited to the table and your contribution is considered and you're really involved in the process. And that's where we all need to be in our organizations: diverse, equitable, and inclusive. So seek input from all audience members, participants, and stakeholders in your presentation. Don't be afraid to ask some questions of your audience. You don't want to just be a talking head for the whole time you're up there. You want to make it interactive. And if I had more time today, we would do, I'd show you a DVD, usually in a 90-minute TOC presentation. I break it up into thirds. I do 30 minutes of information dialogue. I do 30 minutes of an activity. And then I do a DVD that drives home the points I'm trying to make in my presentation. And then we end the day with lessons learned. That is a powerful 90-minute presentation. 30 minutes of content, 30 minutes of activities related to that, a powerful DVD, 10 minutes, 15 minutes long, and then a discussion. Very powerful. That's worked very well for me. And then actively listen to everyone who is available in your audience or whoever might want to share with you. So bias enters our presentations through assumptions that we hold about different social groups. And down here, you notice the implicit association test. This was developed by Harvard University. It's free. You can go online, look up implicit association test. You can take a number of different assessments, and it will come back and show you that even though you're a fair person, you will have bias, you will have favorites, and you will have things that you don't like. We all do. Sometimes it's light versus dark skin color, or younger versus older, or Catholics against Protestants, or whatever it might be. We have certain preferences. We like people who went to our school, and we don't like people who went to that other school. We like people who look like us and think like us. We don't like people who don't. So the implicit association test is a very powerful way for you to get a handle on some of your biases. So what are some other examples of bias that might interact in our presentations? Race, gender, accent, and age are four of the categories that are impacted by bias: race, gender, accent, age, and each can impact our presentation. Presenters can have unconscious bias towards audience members based on what agency they work at, how many years they've been in that field, what their job title is, where their degree is from, what degree they have if they have one. All of these things impact our presentation and how we receive an audience and how they accept our presentation. People carry unconscious bias that are both positive and negative, and they can be very subtle. We need to analyze our audience before we design our presentation. Who's going to be there? What is their level of education, their expertise? What discipline do they represent? And we have to tweak our presentation according to their diversity. Otherwise, we're going to miss some folks and exclude them. What level of information does the audience need? Do we need to, a big picture, macro? Do we really need to get down in the weeds, micro? Is this an intermediate level presentation? Do we need to give them just an overview? Do we need to provide them with resource materials? Lots of different things for us to consider. Now, there are some obstacles to our communicating effectively. Sometimes the people in the audience don't understand our lingo, the acronyms that we use, ABC, IOU, the technical nature of our language. They may not even be from the US. And so English is a second or a third language for them. And so their language proficiency may not be at the graduate school level. So we need to present words and in a way in which people can understand. They may have a different cultural lens. Maybe there's a woman making the presentation to a group, and the group typically doesn't receive presentations from women. They're looking at it through their cultural lens, and that may impact their acceptance of what is being said. Maybe there are disabilities, poor listening skills, seeing, hearing, mobility, attention deficit disorder. There could be other things going on with people in the audience. There can be technological problems, either in your presentation or in their technology if you're presenting to someone with special needs and they're trying to take your information and use it with their technology. And they may have had some bad experiences in the past being excluded. And so you might have exclusive, inclusive past experience issues. We have to use inclusive language. So I would have thought that we would no longer use guys in a mixed gender group, but I have a number of colleagues who continue to do that. When you use guys in a mixed gender group, it infers that it's all men. So if you're going to use guys, then use gals too. And I'm not sure you want to use either of those anyway, but statements like, well, you know, any normal user would use our technology like this. Well, what's a normal user? There's lots of different people out there that have lots of different abilities and disabilities. So I would shy away from normal user, or using terms like, oh, that's crazy, or man, you're lame. That's retarded. You're insane. That's weird. Those words tend to degrade people with mental and physical disorders. So again, think inclusion, men and women. You're safe using those terms, or if somebody in the audience has let you know that they're they, and they have a specific term that they would like you to use when you call on them, well, then you honor that. Don't make assumptions about gender or sexual orientation or race, family unit, technical knowledge, physical, mental disabilities, level of education of audience members. We really have to be careful about any judgments that we make. So inclusive best practices, what can we do if we have hearing and visually impaired attendees? Take some extra time and let people read the slides. I don't know if you noticed that I've not been rushing through the slides in this presentation. Been giving people a chance to read them. Takes some of us longer to read than others. If I have an image, I will describe it. If I have a graph or a chart, I'll explain what it is so that people in the audience who maybe can't see it can understand what's on the screen. If I'm going to show a video, I take a couple minutes and I explain up front what it is and why it's important and what they should be looking for as they watch it. I repeat any questions that the audience might have so that everyone can hear the questions that might not have heard it. I speak in a loud voice at a moderate speed. And I give you enough information on every point, on every PowerPoint, so that if you can't really hear me very well, you can read the slides and get a pretty good idea of what we're talking about. And if not, you can ask a question. Now, some of our stories, the audience really likes stories, and I tell a lot of stories when I teach. And but sometimes get you in trouble. So this presenter was on stage and he was trying to see his screen on his phone so he could read a message, and he couldn't see it because of the bright lights on stage. And so he's trying to be funny and he said, "Hey, I can't see my screen. I guess we've all been there, right?" And he expected everybody to nod and smile, but instead he got a quick comment that said, "Can't say that I've found that to be a problem." And then lots of laughter in the crowd. And then he realized that it was a blind woman who was heckling him. And she very graciously let him off the hook. But be careful about making blanket statements like, well, we've all been there. We all know what that is, right? Because we may not. So let's take a couple of minutes, and using the chat feature, please type in your proven strategies for making your presentations inclusive. And what we'll do is we'll take a couple of minutes and we'll let you do that. And then I'm going to continue on with the presentation. So next we're going to talk about virtual presentations. How do we make them inclusive? How do we provide information in a way in which people can use it in a meaningful way? So when you're working in a remote situation, you have other people pulling on your attention and distracting you. And maybe you've been working all day or all week or all month on that little computer and you have computer fatigue. And so now I come along and I want to, hey, let's teach a class. And you just have a really hard time giving it your full attention because you're burnt out and you're being distracted by your kids or your dogs or racket outside. Audience members may not have full capabilities on their remote system. So you may be trying to have them do something on their screen and they may not either have the technology to do it or the technological know-how to get their machine to work it. So, or sometimes maybe they're having connectivity and software problems. There's also 5 more issues about presenting remotely. Lighting is one of them. You've got to have good lighting. It's very important that you have good lighting. So I just turned on another light to put some light on the side of my face. I have light up behind me. I have light in front of me. So good lighting, very important. If your back is to a window, you notice I have 2 windows back there. I close them tightly. So the white light from the window can bleed in and take away from your background. While natural light is often the best choice, if your home office doesn't have natural light, consider buying a light to enhance your image. Backgrounds are optional. I could have a really pretty beach background behind me right now, but as a presenter, I will present for a while, and many times I present with another presenter. And when the other presenter is presenting, I tend to lean back in my chair. And if I had an artificial background, I would disappear into the back of my screen. So I've chosen to not have a background here for this presentation, just to point that out. Consider what background you want to use for Zoom or Microsoft Teams or whatever you're doing, and make it appropriate if you use one. Know your technology, know it well. Practice to become comfortable with the features. Have a co-host or a moderator. We call them a Zoom master to assist you with the technology. Closed captioning is now available on Zoom for an extra fee and for from some other software providers. So I like closed captioning. I like that feature a lot. Look at the web camera. When you're presenting, the tendency is to look down at your notes. Practice looking forward into the web camera as you are presenting, so people feel like you are looking right at them. Some people leave their picture up on the screen so they can see themselves. Other people take it off so it's not a distraction. So decide what you want to do. Do you want to have your self view screen on there, or do you want to take it off? Put the camera at eye level. When it's too high, it's difficult to maintain eye contact. And as we tend to drop our gaze, keep your camera and your eyes at eye level. Try not to stare at your notes when you're presenting. Stand up or sit down. I have a couple colleagues that stand up and for all their presentations. They like that very much. It's all what you want to do. It gives you higher energy. When you're sitting, you want to lean forward like you're a newscaster. Another thing for you to think about to be inclusive is, are your slides readable? When you underline and italic in your fonts on your page, you make it harder for some people to recognize the shapes. Trebuchet, Times New Roman, and Arial are three of the most readable fonts for you to use. This is Trebuchet I'm using right now. 20 font is the smallest I use. 24 is on this slide, and the bold title is 32, Trebuchet. If you're going to have a GIF for one of these animated animals or features, be careful about them and put a limit on how many times it pops up on your screen. My grandson sends me ones and they never stop. I can open it now a month later and it's still there doing hoops. Notice that if you use a flashing strobe light in one of your GIFs, it can trigger seizures in people who have epilepsy. And in 2016, a Newsweek reporter was purposefully tweeted flashing images so that they would make him have a seizure. We don't want to do that in our presentations. We also don't want to use red and green color as a method for people to see on our charts certain negative or positive items, because many people are colorblind. So instead of colors, use labels, icons, and other visual markers and tags. Ensure your text is visible. Don't put red on green or brown on green or blue letters on black or blue letters on purple or yellow letters on white or white letters on yellow. You can't see it well. So a second question for us to talk about later is on your chat feature, what do you do to make sure your presentations are readable? What font do you use? What size? And what color combinations do you use and why? So another thing you can do is, if you have a URL that you want to share with people, then read that out to the audience so they can write it down if they want to. Or if you happen to notice on my very first slide, I put 2 URLs on that first slide. One was for how to do your lettering to accommodate persons with visual disabilities. And the other was a DVD that I'm going to recommend on inclusion. Ensure any electronic communication is 508 compliant. That means everybody can use it, even persons with disabilities. Consider sending your slides ahead of time to someone if they need them. When playing a video, consider audience members who can't see the screen or who can't hear the sound. So sometimes you're out in the audience and someone's playing a video or someone tells a joke or something. You can't see it, you can't hear it, and you miss out on it. So consider letting the audience know in advance what that is. Here are a couple of, this is a fabulous Deloitte Respect and Inclusion training video. Highly encourage you to take a look at it. If you're going to provide captions and foreign language translation, I really think that's a wonderful thing to be able to provide. Microsoft has free presentation translator. Google has real-time captioning that you can use on its slides product. Zoom, you can now buy for $25 or $30 a month, you can buy closed captioning. Adobe Connect has had it since 2016. So in conclusion, apply these tips to make a big difference with your audience to ensure that all attendees understand your content and are being included in the process. Slide content design and delivery They affect how well your crowd will be able to understand your message and receive it. Use inclusive language. Subtle changes to what you show can help all employees, not just those with disabilities. If you'd like to reach me, here's my email and here are our phone number contacts if you have some additional questions. And if we have time, then there's some other things that we can talk about. What is one thing that stuck with you from today's training? And what will you do to make your training more inclusive? I thank you all for your time. Thank you so much. This is Skip Pettit. And again, our presentation was designing and delivering inclusive and impactful presentations. Thank you so much.